you began your career long before
69,
me.
40 years ago, before you were born.
Yeah, thank you, Robert. So what was the first work here at
I
BAM?
did a work called The Life and Times of Sigmund Freud. It was a work in 3 acts and was silent. It was about 3 hours long. At that time, I was not interested in professional actors. It was performed by people on the street, people that are friends of mine. I was at that time teaching school in New Jersey and in Harlem, Bedford-Stuyvesant. People that I was working with in these institutions came together and we created this work. So, not a historic work about Freud, but more of a poetic work. And I, at that time, suddenly became interested in having my work seen in a formal theater. So much of what was happening in the performing art world and the art world, dance world was happening in found spaces, rooftops, alleyways, loft spaces, streets, parking lots, and I was a part of that. And suddenly I wanted to break from that. I was curious to have the experience of working in a space that was two-dimensional, where one side was hidden and the public was on one side and the performers were on another. And I was interested in illusion. At that time there was an exhibition at the Whitney Museum of American Art. It was called Art Against Illusion, a summation of the 60s. And I thought, well, we're going into the 70s and I'm not sure I want to go in that direction. So this was dealing really more with 19th century scenic techniques, painted scenery, flat scenery on canvases. And people that performed in the work were not asked to act or to do anything extraordinary. They could just be who they were as ordinary people, and in that sense maybe were extraordinary. They did very simple things, walking, sitting, and I created different tableaus or images so people actually could be themselves in these constructed situations.
The question I need to ask is, why did you think about BAM for that particular work?
Well, it was difficult to, first of all, to find a proscenium theater. I had done one work at the Anderson Theater in Lower Manhattan, which had burned and had closed. And BAM already had a history of presenting new work. I mean, the Living Theater had been here, which was a revolution, and it was beginning to find a public that that other people didn't have. Ellen Stewart didn't really have a proscenium stage at La Mama. I think it's extraordinary what Ellen was doing, and with La Mama and what she was doing internationally, and the theater scene was, unparalleled in New York, and what she was doing in the 60s, and making connections with people internationally. But BAM was beginning to do that as well. Nilan Karlweiss was someone very important to bringing in people from internationally, people from India, people from Africa, people from Latin America. So I felt the right place to do it. It had an identity for an audience that was looking for something different, was looking for an alternative in New York, to go to a conventional theater, but not.
And you're an artist whose work has been in multiple venues as part of this organization. And is that still true in terms of your experience of working here, that those audiences are what you desire for your work? I mean, how do you look at all this?
I think that now over the years, really it's been 40 years since I presented my first work here, that you see now rather sophisticated audience in New York that is coming to see work that you would not get on Broadway or you'd not get elsewhere in the city. So it's serving a very important function for this community, for New York. It's given a window to the world. I'm often quite critical of our cultural policy in America. I feel that we're very cut off. We don't really know so much about what's going on in the rest of the world. But I think here BAM is the exception, and we are allowed a chance to have some idea of what's happening globally, which is very important.
And how, because you have had work done globally, as well as here in New York City, maybe, how does that all get digested into your world, Bob?
Well, it's very curious. I've had, I think, 47 premieres in Paris
Wow.
and France since 1971. So the French know my work much better than people here in the United States. They more or less discovered my work. They've produced work. 4 seasons ago, I had 8 productions in 1 year
Amazing.
in France. So I've had 9 productions since 1999 in Berlin. I had 7 productions in the course of about 10 years in Hamburg. So the Germans know my work much better than here. I've done Chekhov, I've done Shakespeare, I've done many things. So it's, this is the one place where my work has been seen in the United States. Is here at BAM.
Right. And tell me, the current production of Quartet in the BAM Harvey Theater, you balance that experience in the BAM Harvey versus previous work in the Opera House. I mean, can you give us an insight into how scale plays a role in?
Well, I think Quartet is more of a chamber work. I mean, it's not Einstein on the Beach. It's not a full-scale production on that scale. It's basically written for 2 people, and then I do it with 5. But originally it was 4, now it's 5. But I think you could easily get lost in the Gilman Opera House. The Harvey Theater offers intimacy. Very often you have 1 or 2 people on stage alone. I think that the scale of the production is right for the scale of the building. And it was done originally in a theater about approximately the same size in Paris at the Odeon, which is the National Theater.
Well, BAM wants to give you a gift here.
Oh, and what does this say? I think, therefore, I am BAM.